My fiancé slapped me because I refused to wear his mom's old dress for our wedding. Well, now that mama's boy can go ahead and marry his mom instead. I really thought I had my life together at 26. I was engaged to a guy I'd been with for 6 years. He was 27, and I truly believed we were in love. Looking back now, it feels like a cruel joke. How did I not see the red flags? But isn't that what happens when you're deeply invested in the idea of a perfect love story? You ignore the bad signs because you're clinging to the dream. We got engaged in April 2024, and I was over the moon. I couldn't stop thinking about our wedding and how beautiful it was going to be. We picked next May for the big day because it was our anniversary, and I thought it was so romantic. At the time, I was thrilled and imagined a perfect life ahead. But now, I can't believe how naive I was. I spent countless nights lying in bed, imagining every detail of our future together. By July 2024, we started planning the wedding. I threw myself into it completely. I decided on a soft blue and white color theme because I thought it would look gorgeous in the spring. I spent hours on Pinterest, putting together mood boards and finding inspiration. I'd share all my ideas with my fiancé, hoping he'd be just as excited as I was. But looking back, he never really cared. He barely paid attention to anything. When I showed him ideas, he would just say, "Looks good," or give one-word replies. I told myself he was just busy with work and letting me have my dream wedding. But now I realize he didn't care at all. While I was staying up late researching caterers, florists, and decorations, he was probably talking to his mom about every little detail instead of planning anything with me. You see, my ex-fiancé, yes, ex-fiancé, is an only child. What I didn't realize at the time was that I wasn't just marrying him, I was marrying his mom too. He was the ultimate mama's boy. He called her every day, sometimes multiple times a day, to ask her opinion on everything. Whether it was about buying a car or deciding what we should have for dinner, he couldn't make a move without her approval. At first, I thought it was sweet that he cared so much about his family. I even admired how close they were. But now, I see it for what it was. She controlled his life, and he let her. A couple of weeks ago, I went wedding dress shopping with my mom and sister. I was so excited for this special day. I'd been dreaming about it for years. We visited several stores, and I tried on dress after dress, hoping to find the one. At the last shop, I found a stunning, elegant gown that made me feel like a princess. It fit me beautifully and only needed a few small adjustments. I felt so happy and confident standing in front of the mirror with my mom and sister tearing up, telling me how beautiful I looked. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. I was so thrilled that I snapped a few photos of the dress and sent them to my fiancé. He replied, saying it looked beautiful, and I was on cloud 9. I really thought he loved it too. But what I didn't know was that he immediately shared the photos with his mom, like a little boy running to show off his homework. That's when everything started to fall apart. His mom, who I'll now refer to as the would-have-been mother-in-law, completely freaked out when she saw the dress. She called me right away, but I was still out with my mom and sister, so I didn't pick up. I figured I'd call her back later, assuming she was just excited or wanted to talk about the dress. I had no idea what was coming. When I got home that evening, I was shocked to find her already there. She'd let herself in using the spare key we'd given her, for emergencies only. She was sitting in the living room like she owned the place, and the look on her face immediately told me something was wrong. I walked in, still glowing from finding my dream dress, but that happiness vanished the moment I saw her. She jumped up from the couch and started yelling at me. She accused me of lying and said I had promised to wear her old wedding dress. Her tone was so angry, like I'd committed some horrible crime. I was stunned. I had never made such a promise. In fact, I'd never even seen her old wedding dress. From what I'd heard, it was decades old and probably falling apart. While she ranted and raved, all I could think was, where's my fiancé? Why isn't he here backing me up? Instead, I stood there alone trying to defend myself. I told her politely but firmly that I had never agreed to wear her dress and that I'd already chosen my gown. That only made her angrier. She accused me of being disrespectful and ruining her vision for the wedding. Apparently, her vision mattered more than mine. When my fiancé finally showed up, I thought he'd take my side. But to my shock, he didn't. Instead, he stood there awkwardly, refusing to say anything. It was like he was too scared to go against his mom. That's when I realized how deeply tied he was to her. The final straw came a few days later when we had a huge fight about the dress. I stood my ground and told him I wasn't going to wear his mom's old dress. It was my wedding, and I deserved to feel beautiful in the dress I chose. That's when he snapped. He slapped me across the face, yelling that I was selfish and ungrateful. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This man, who I thought I loved, wasn't my partner at all. He was just an extension of his mother. I left that night and never looked back. Now, I know I made the right decision. No one deserves to feel second to their partner's parent, and no one deserves to be treated like that. If he wants to marry his mom, he's welcome to. As for me, I'm walking away with my dignity intact. I was completely caught off guard. This woman, who I thought liked me and who I had spent 6 years trying to impress, was now standing in my home, calling me a liar, over a dress I never agreed to wear. I felt blindsided and hurt. I tried to stay calm as I explained to her that I had never promised to wear her wedding dress. Not once. But, of course, she didn't listen. Instead, her voice grew louder and sharper with every word. She kept shouting that I was lying and didn't deserve to marry her son. She acted like she was doing me some kind of favor by allowing me to join their family. I stood there, stunned, unable to even form a response. My mind raced, but the words just wouldn't come out. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned around and walked to my room like a scolded child. Even with the door closed behind me, I could still hear her angry voice echoing through the house. After what felt like forever, I finally heard the front door slam shut. The quiet was a relief, but it didn't last long. A few minutes later, my fiancé came into the room. He had the audacity to ask me what had happened, as if he hadn't just heard his mom yelling from wherever he'd been hiding. I looked at him. This man I had thought I knew, the man I believed I loved, and all I felt was disappointment and betrayal. Still in shock, I explained what had just happened. I told him everything, hoping he would comfort me or, at the very least, understand how unfair his mom had been. But instead of standing up for me, he began defending her. He told me that apparently 6 years ago when we had first started dating, his mom had shown me her wedding dress, and I had supposedly said I'd love to wear it one day. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had no memory of ever saying that. Sure, maybe I had said something polite back then, like, it's a beautiful dress, to be kind, but there was no way I had promised to wear it. And even if I had, it was 6 years ago. Things change, and that dress wasn't exactly timeless. Styles from 37 years ago don't usually hold up, and frankly, it would look better in a museum than on a modern bride. But my fiancé wasn't hearing any of it. He actually entertained the idea that I was breaking some sort of promise by not wearing it. That night, I went to bed feeling completely alone, even with him lying next to me. I tossed and turned, replaying everything that had happened. How had things gone so wrong? I thought about all the times I had bent over backward to please his family, putting their needs before my own just to keep the peace. And for what? To be accused of being unworthy of marrying their precious son? I felt crushed. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages from his mom. My stomach dropped as I read them. Each one was like a stab to the heart. She called me a liar again and again, saying I wasn't good enough for her son and that he shouldn't marry me. It was cruel and hurtful, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop the tears from falling. I had spent years trying to build a good relationship with this woman, and this was what I got in return. Hoping for some support, I showed the messages to my fiancé. I thought maybe now he'd see how out of line his mom was being, but instead, he brushed it off. "She's probably just hurt that you don't want to wear her dress," he said, as if that excused everything. Just hurt? She was attacking my character, trying to sabotage our engagement, and all he could say was that she was hurt? That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about respect, about standing up for myself, and about having a partner who would support me no matter what. And suddenly, I realized I didn't have any of that. I had spent 6 years with a man who would always put his mom's feelings above mine, who would never truly stand by me. I tried explaining to him that this was our wedding, not a chance for his mom to relive hers. I told him that I wanted to feel beautiful and comfortable in my own dress on my wedding day. But he just couldn't understand why I wouldn't do this one thing for her. He kept saying it would mean so much to her. "Can't you do this one thing for her?" he asked, as if I hadn't already done 100 things for her throughout our relationship. The more we talked, or rather, the more I tried to talk and he dismissed my feelings, the clearer it became how deep this problem really was. I started looking back on our entire relationship, remembering all the times he had put his mom's opinions and needs above mine. From little things like where we should go for dinner to bigger decisions like how we spent holidays, his mom had always come first. And every time, I had gone along with it to avoid conflict. But this was the breaking point. I couldn't stay in a relationship where I was always second to his mom. I deserved a partner who would value me, support me, and treat me as an equal. And clearly, he wasn't that partner. That morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. I walked away. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. No one deserves to feel like they're competing with their partner's parent, and no one should have to fight to be respected in their own relationship. Looking back now, I see it as a blessing in disguise. Walking away from him meant walking toward a life where I could finally put myself first. And honestly, I've never felt more free. How had I missed all the warning signs before this? I was trying so hard to be reasonable. I even suggested compromises to make everyone happy. I said maybe I could wear a piece of jewelry from his mom or incorporate some lace from her dress into my veil. But no, with them, it was all or nothing. Either I wore the entire dress, or I was an ungrateful liar who broke promises. There was no middle ground. My future mother-in-law wouldn't stop. She kept calling and texting, bombarding me with guilt trips and outright insults. I felt like I was being attacked from all sides. And my fiancé? He did absolutely nothing to stop her. In fact, he seemed to side with her more and more as time went on. I tried to stand firm. I reminded both of them that this was my wedding too, and that I had a right to choose what I wore. But they wouldn't listen. They acted like I was the unreasonable one, like I was causing all the problems. They twisted everything to make me feel like I was the crazy one for wanting to wear my own wedding dress on my own wedding day. After the disaster with my future mother-in-law, if I can even call her that anymore, I decided it was time to have a serious talk with my so-called fiancé. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Having a rational conversation with a mama's boy who can't let go of his mom is like talking to a wall. I had to wait for what felt like forever to even get a moment of his attention.
Why?
Because his mom's feelings apparently mattered more than those of his future wife. When we finally sat down to talk, I tried to keep calm and said something that should have been obvious. I want to wear my own dress on my wedding day. That's normal, right? I mean, what bride doesn't dream of choosing her own dress? But his response floored me. He had the nerve to tell me, the wedding isn't just for us. It's for our parents too. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was marrying him, not his entire family. I didn't realize saying yes to him meant saying yes to his mom too. Somehow, I managed to stay calm and explained that unless his mom was footing the bill for the entire wedding, this was our wedding, not hers. But of course, logic and common sense don't work on someone stuck in mama's boy mode. Then, because I clearly enjoy making my life harder, I reminded him that he originally said my dress was beautiful. I thought that might snap him out of it. But do you know what he admitted? He said he only told me that because he thought it was what I wanted to hear. He actually thought my dream dress was ugly. The level of manipulation in this family was mind-blowing. But I didn't even react at that point. What was the point? Clearly, honesty wasn't a strong suit in this family. Still, I tried to be the bigger person. I suggested a compromise again. I said I could wear something else of his mom's, like a piece of her jewelry, as a tribute. But, of course, that wasn't good enough. He told me I should be grateful that his mom even offered her dress, as if it were some kind of grand honor. Should I bow down and kiss her feet next? Maybe offer her my firstborn too? At that point, I couldn't keep my cool anymore. I straight up asked him, "Are you marrying me or your mother's?" It was a fair question, don't you think? If he wanted to be so close to her, maybe we should just call off the wedding and let him live his happily ever after with her instead. They'd probably make the perfect couple. That really set him off. He started yelling, accusing me of making a big deal out of nothing. He kept saying, "It's just a dress. Why are you being so difficult?" I couldn't handle it anymore. I stormed out of the room and called my mom, the only sane person in this entire mess. I poured my heart out to her, telling her every single detail. She was shocked, to say the least. She couldn't believe how my fiancé and his mom were acting. For the first time in days, I felt a little relief. At least someone understood what I was going through. At least someone was on my side. When I finally went back downstairs, ready to confront my fiancé again, guess what? He was gone. He had run off to his mom's house like a child running to his safety blanket. He didn't even have the decency to tell me in person. Instead, he left me a text saying he'd stay at his mom's place until I came to my senses. Here's the thing, I have come to my senses. If marrying him means marrying his mother too, I want no part of it. I'm seriously rethinking this entire relationship. I've spent 6 years compromising, bending over backward to please him and his family, but enough is enough. This isn't how I imagine my life, and it's definitely not the marriage I want. I deserve better. I wanted a husband, not a package deal that came with a controlling mother-in-law as an unwanted bonus. First off, thank you to everyone who showed support and left kind words. It means so much to know I'm not crazy for standing my ground in this absolute circus of a situation. After talking to my mom again, she only confirmed what I already knew. My fiancé is acting like a childish, spineless mama's boy. Yesterday, the queen bee herself, my future mother-in-law, called me and said we needed to talk. Foolishly, I agreed. I should have known better than to expect a normal, reasonable conversation from her. Asking her to be rational is like expecting a shark to go vegetarian. It's just not going to happen. She started off by accusing me of breaking a promise I never even made. She actually had the audacity to say she was hurt by my actions, as if she was the victim in all this. Before I could even get a word in, she made this grand, dramatic statement. She was willing to move past it if I agreed to wear her wedding dress. How generous of her, right? Maybe I should build her a shrine or something to show my eternal gratitude for her forgiveness. But I wasn't about to play her game. I shut that idea down immediately. I told her clearly that it was my wedding day, and I would wear what I wanted. Still, because I apparently enjoy stressing myself out, I offered a compromise. I could wear something else of hers, like jewelry or a small piece of lace from her dress. But no, that wasn't good enough for Her Royal Highness. It was her dress or nothing. Honestly, I'm surprised she didn't also demand that I legally change my last name to hers or let her walk down the aisle in my place. I tried one last time to be reasonable. I explained that I wasn't comfortable wearing her dress, that I had never promised to do so, and even suggested that she might be confusing me with one of my fiancé's ex-girlfriends. Let's be real, she probably thinks we're all the same anyway, just a line of nameless women waiting to give her grandkids. That really set her off. She exploded, calling me a liar and, get this, a witch. Yes, a witch. What is this, the 1200s? That was it for me. I'd had enough. I hung up on her and blocked her number. Good riddance, as they say. But, of course, it didn't end there. My spineless fiancé texted me shortly after, saying it wasn't fair for me to yell at his precious mommy about the dress. According to him, I'm the one who blew everything out of proportion. Never mind that his mom was the one throwing insults and acting completely unhinged. In his mind, his mom can do no wrong, and I'm just some evil woman trying to take him away from her. I told him to come to our house so we could talk face to face. But guess what? He refused. He said he'd come tomorrow, as if I was the one who needed to wait for him. So there I was, left to sit in the house and stew over the mess my life had become. I called a few friends to get their thoughts, and they were just as shocked as I was at how quickly everything had fallen apart. That night, I found myself sitting in the dark, staring at my engagement ring. It no longer felt like a symbol of love and commitment. Instead, it felt like a chain tying me to a future I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. For the first time, I seriously considered that this engagement might not end in a wedding. I took off the ring and set it on the nightstand. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. The next day, the so-called day of reckoning finally arrived. My fiancé actually showed up at our house, and I didn't waste any time. The second he walked through the door, I laid into him. I told him exactly how hurt and angry I was at both him and his mom for trying to pressure me into wearing that hideous dress. He tried to interrupt me, probably to defend himself, but I wasn't having it. I cut him off and told him straight up that this wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about our relationship. It was about him being willing to throw away everything we had built over a piece of fabric. Of course, he didn't see it that way. He had the nerve to tell me that he was only standing up for what was right, as if his mother's ridiculous demands were somehow the moral high ground in this mess. I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. I stayed calm, at least on the outside, and told him that I had been compromising throughout our entire relationship. I reminded him that I had always tried to keep the peace with his family, bending over backward to make them happy. But enough was enough. I deserved to have a say in my own wedding. I deserved to be with someone who would support me, not someone who let their mom control every aspect of their life. He didn't want to hear it. He kept going on and on about how much the dress meant to his mom, as if that was more important than what it meant to me. I realized then that he wasn't going to change. He was always going to put his mom first, no matter how unfair or unreasonable she was. By the end of the conversation, I felt drained but also clearer than ever. This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the partner I wanted. I told him that if he couldn't stand by me, we had no future together. And honestly, the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't ready to let go of his mom, and I wasn't willing to play second fiddle in my own marriage. As he left, I took one last look at the engagement ring sitting on the nightstand. It didn't feel like a chain anymore. It felt like freedom. I wanted to ask him if he'd left his brain at his mother's house along with his backbone, but I held back. Instead, I calmly explained that the wedding dress is a huge part of the wedding day. I told him there was no way I'd wear something I wasn't comfortable in. Then I reminded him that if we were really going to get married, and at this point, that was a big if, he should be supporting me, not siding with his mother over me. That's when things got heated. His face turned red with anger, especially because I said if we get married instead of when. He started yelling, accusing me of planning to cancel the wedding over what he called a stupid dress. He acted like it was all a joke. Let me tell you, the only joke here was his behavior. I stood firm. I told him that this entire situation was making me seriously question whether I even wanted to marry him. And honestly, I meant it. If this was how he acted now, what would he be like after we were married? Right on cue, he tried to storm out of the house, his usual move when things got tough. But not this time. I wasn't letting him run away. I followed him, telling him we needed to talk this through, or I would end things right then and there. That's when it happened. He spun around and slapped me across the face, like I was some misbehaving child, not the woman he was supposed to marry. I stood there, stunned, as he stormed out and ran back to his mother's house. The sound of that slap echoed in my ears long after he was gone. I couldn't believe what had just happened. This was the man I thought I loved, the man I thought I knew, and he had just raised his hand to me, all over a dress, all because of his mother's feelings. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't love. This wasn't a partnership. This was abuse, plain and simple. I called my sister right away. She came over immediately, and together, we packed my bag. There was no way I could stay in that house another night. That was it. No turning back. There's no way I'm marrying this abusive mama's boy. I texted him right after, telling him it was over. No discussion, no second chances. He'd shown his true colors, and they were uglier than his mother's outdated dress. This morning, I took the first steps to protect myself. I went to the police station and filed for a restraining order. The court date is set, and I have all the evidence I need. I took photos of the red mark on my cheek from where he slapped me, and even have video footage of him coming to and leaving the house. Let's see him try to talk his way out of this one. Filing for the restraining order was both empowering and heartbreaking. No one wants to believe their relationship could end like this. As for the wedding, I've decided to turn this disaster into something positive. Instead of canceling the venue, I'm using it to throw an early birthday party for myself. And instead of wasting the honeymoon trip, I'm taking my sister. At least I know she'll always have my back. I also took some advice and briefly unblocked my ex and his mom. Big mistake. His mom immediately bombarded me with nasty messages, calling me a liar, a gold digger, and saying I was never good enough for her precious son. Her bitterness was shocking, even though I shouldn't have been surprised. I muted both of them to keep my sanity and sent one final text to my ex, officially ending things and telling him exactly what I thought of him. He responded with excuses, claiming he'd lost control and begging for forgiveness. But no. You don't get to slap me and then ask for a second chance. I've received so many messages asking what happened after I called off the wedding, so here's an update to answer the most common questions. Thank you again for all your support during this chaotic time. It was a mess. At first, he didn't believe me. He kept saying I was overreacting and that we could work things out. When he finally realized I was serious, he started begging me to reconsider. Then, he got angry and tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was breaking his mother's heart. Even after everything, he was still more worried about his mom's feelings than mine. The worst part was when he showed up at my apartment unannounced, crying and pleading with me to take him back. I had to threaten to call the police before he would leave. It was emotionally exhausting, but it only confirmed I'd made the right choice. This was a headache, but I managed to recover most of it. The venue was incredibly understanding. They refunded me a large portion of the deposit, especially after I explained the situation. Other vendors, like the caterer and florist, charged me cancellation fees, but overall, I came out of it with most of the money back. Honestly, I'm feeling stronger every day. It hasn't been easy, but walking away from that toxic relationship was the best decision I've ever made. I'm learning to put myself first, and I finally feel free when I explained what happened to the vendors. Many of them were understanding. The venue let me transfer the deposit to a different event, so that worked out well. The caterer was a bit tougher to deal with, but after some back and forth, we agreed on a partial refund. The biggest loss, though, was the wedding dress. Since it had already been altered, the store wouldn't take it back. Instead of letting it sit in a closet and remind me of everything that happened, I decided to donate it to a charity that provides wedding dresses to military brides. At least some good came out of it, and that brought me some peace. Very minimal, and only through lawyers. After he showed up at my apartment unannounced, I knew I needed clear boundaries. I filed for a restraining order, and while he initially tried to fight it, he eventually agreed to a mutual no-contact order. It's been such a relief to know I don't have to deal with him directly anymore. That chapter of my life is closed, and I'm focused on moving forward. Unfortunately, yes. His mother has been on a full-blown smear campaign, telling anyone who will listen that I'm a selfish, ungrateful bride who broke her son's heart. She even tried reaching out to some of my family members on social media, hoping they'd convince me to change my mind. It was exhausting, and I ended up blocking her on every platform to protect my peace. Surprisingly, his dad reached out to me privately. He sent me a kind message apologizing for everything and said he understood my decision. It was unexpected but appreciated, especially given how hostile his mother has been. My immediate family has been incredibly supportive. My mom and dad were furious when they found out about everything, especially the slap. They helped me move out of the apartment I shared with my ex and even offered to cover any legal fees if I needed help. Having them by my side made such a difference. As for my friends, the reactions were mixed. Most were supportive, but a few thought I was making a mistake by ending the relationship. One friend even suggested I should have just worn the dress to keep the peace. Let's just say we're not as close anymore. This whole experience really showed me who my true friends are, and I'm grateful for the ones who stood by me. The engagement ring became its own little drama. At first, I tried to give it back to my ex, but he refused, saying it was a gift. I didn't feel right keeping it, so I decided to sell it. I donated the money to a domestic violence shelter. It felt empowering to turn something so painful into something that could help others in need. That decision brought me a sense of closure. Yes, and it was the best decision I could have made. The trip was originally planned for Paris, which has always been my dream destination, so we went ahead with it. What was supposed to be a romantic getaway turned into an amazing sister adventure. We explored the city, enjoyed incredible food, and spent hours walking along the Seine, talking about life and relationships. It was such a healing experience. My sister and I have always been close, but this trip brought us even closer. It was exactly what I needed to start moving forward with my life. Not yet, and honestly, I'm in no rush. This experience taught me so much about myself and what I want in a partner. Right now, I'm focusing on my own growth and happiness. I've started therapy to work through some of the emotional pain from the relationship, and it's been incredibly helpful. When I do decide to date again, I'll approach relationships with more awareness. I'll pay closer attention to red flags and won't ignore my gut feelings. And you can bet I'll be extra mindful about how any potential partner interacts with their family. Not at all. Ending this relationship was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was absolutely the right choice. I deserve love and respect, and now I know I won't settle for anything less. Looking back, I feel stronger and more empowered, knowing I stood up for myself. It's not easy to walk away from someone you once loved, but sometimes it's the only way to truly find peace.